two last concepts, and one is data sovereignty. So we've been talking about data. So we are going to look at data sovereignty. And when we talk about data sovereignty, what are we really talking about? I know a lot of time you might have heard some terminology, but you cannot put your finger on it or, understand what is it talking about. Data sovereignty refers to the legal and regulatory control that a country has over data stored, processed within its jurisdiction. It dictates how organizations handle, store, transfer data, ensuring compliance with national laws and regulations. Data sovereignty is crucial for data privacy, security, compliance with global and regional regulations such as the GDPR, CCPA, and China SSL. And the reasons that I don't know if you've been following the news where they believe that China was collecting data um, on TikTok, and that was an illegal act. And because whoever or whatever country or places that's collecting the information, there are legal grounds that they must have to do those kind of transfer and processing information. So the sovereignty, the data sovereignty is a legal, right, and regulatory control that a country has over data stored or processed within its jurisdiction. And sometimes you'll hear people say, well, America sell our data to China already, or this country sell our data. There are regulations that governs how certain operation in terms of data process is carried out. It indicates how the organization is going to handle the information, store it, and transfer the data. Places like TikTok, that is owned by another country. How do they handle and store the information that they're taking from the people here? Ensuring compliance with national laws and regulations. One of the arguments was that they were not in compliance. They were basically the argument was that there are US enemies and collecting information. Data sovereignty is crucial for data privacy and security and compliance with global and regional regulation. So we talk about data sovereignty, right? Data localization law. What are the laws, the regulation that require data to be stored and processed within a specific country? And you got to understand that every country have their own laws, their localized laws that is going to govern how you collect data and how those data are stored. Because one thing you don't want is enemies and information getting out to the enemies of the country, right? Data transfer agreement, right? Contacts outlining the terms and conditions for transferring data across borders. There has to be some data transfer agreement, right? Data privacy regulation, laws that govern the collection and the use and disclosure of personal data. So data are not, especially sensitive data, they're not just hanging around, people just giving information. There are laws and regulations that govern how data is moved around from across different country or within a country. Okay, so so the key thing is data sovereignty. We said it's a legal and regulatory control a country has over data stored within its jurisdiction. Key consideration is jurisdiction compliance. Company must adhere to local data laws. Example of some data laws are the GDPR in the Europe, the CCPA in California. You have to comply by those local laws when you are collecting and when you are storing the data. Cross-border data transfer, these are key. consideration, countries have restriction on transferring personal data to other nations. China, the CSL, Russia data localization law. They all have their own laws and how data are transferred and collected. Stores, okay. Cloud storage challenge. Organization using global cloud providers must ensure compliance with local law. So when they're going to store the data, upload it in the cloud, they have to be. The impact of data sovereignty. It dictates where and how data can be stored and processed. So that's the whole thing. So the laws and the policies and the regulation that governs it says how data can be stored and processed. You cannot just store, collect people's data and store it and process it anywhere. There are laws. Affects multinational companies handling sensitive users' information. Again, we see this all the time. The information in Facebook, the information on Twitter, the information. How do these people collect, store, and process information? If it's an overseas company, how do they collect, store, and process information? There are laws that a country will give in terms that you have to follow in terms of using and storing those information. Influence cloud computing strategies and data residency plan. And I think I've often hear about the law of California that in terms of data collection. So key regulation governing data sovereignty. What are some of these regulatory bodies that govern data sovereignty? So they are entity, they are bodies, they are regulatory bodies that govern data sovereignty. How data is collect, processed, stored, and handled. There are regulatory bodies that governs all of that. So general data protection regulation, that's what the G, and the acronym for that is GDPR, sorry, and it's a European Union. It applies to any company handling the EU citizens' data regardless of location. So they implement their GDPR bodies, and it says that you have to follow this regulation when you are handling any data concerning our citizen, regardless of your location. You have to follow this. So if you're going to collect information, whether you have an app, whether you have a platform, and you're going to collect information, whatever information you're collecting, you have to go by the regulatory body. If it is a penny testing, if it's something you're doing, you have to go by what their regulatory body says. It enforces strict rules on data transfer outside of the EU. So the data that's coming, strict rule. We saw the uproar the other day again with China. With the China and America was how they collected the data and what they were collecting the data of the citizens to do with it. So there are strict laws in the EU how you collect information, which is governed by the General Data Protection Regulation. Okay, and then most of them requires the user's consent for data collection and process. And many of you might have gone on apps on different platforms, and you will see sometimes you have to consent that the information will not be shared with a third party. Your data, your information will be sold to a third party, what they will use the information to do. So all of that is usually outlined, okay, in the policy, in the regulation. California Consumer Privacy Act in the United States, this is our governing body, right? It gives Californian resident control over their personal data, require business to disclose data collection practices, grant users the right to request data deletion. So if it is that, so let if I could give you an example. The other day I went on the internet and all my data was on the internet. All my private information was on the internet. Where I live, my phone number, my age, my date of birth, where I've lived before. And I was like, this is crazy. These people collected my data and didn't tell me that they were going to disclose it online. And so what I did, I called the company and asked them to remove my information from off the internet. right? So California Consumer Privacy Act, they have that you can request, grant, you can, the users can request that their information be deleted. They have to disclose that they're collecting your information, and for what purpose are you collecting this information, right? So every country have their own regulation of the information that can be transferred out of their country, right? You have the China cybersecurity law, a personal information protection law that requires strict data localization. Data collected in China must stay in China. They have that law. Restrict across border data transfer unless approved by authorities. So China, as you can see, they have their own cyber law that protects against transferring of information. And they're saying whatever information is collected must stay within China. Those information cannot be transferred out. And believe me, they have their watchdogs on the internet and on these platforms watching for information that are transferring out of their zone, right? And one thing I can tell you with China, they don't play when it comes on to their data, right? So if they have a law in place that says that all information must be strictly localized, cannot transfer abroad, and any data that is collected must stay here, they mean it unless the information is authorized. Russia data localization law. So Russia have a data localization law, and it mandates that companies store Russian citizen data on a server physically located in Russia. Can you imagine? They require that all data that are collected by Russia, by any company, must stay in Russia. And non-compliance can lead to fines and severe bans, right? So if you don't comply with the local um, laws, it can turn out really bad. And you're going to realize that even as a cybersecurity personnel, even as you carry out pen testing and all of these, that in the initial stage of setting up and planning and all of that, that they have to know what the local law said, the laws of doing pen testing in certain location or geographical location, and even buying certain equipment and shipping them. There are laws that govern those in terms of the cybersecurity world. So we see that Russia have their own data localization. California has their own, as we can see, the Consumer Privacy Act of California. I don't know if it governs all of America. I will have to do a little bit more research, but I know for California, the resident have a right over their data. China have their own implementation. Russia have theirs. Any information you're collecting must stay within our country, must be localized. Challenges of data sovereignty. What are some of the challenges that we will observe in data sovereignty? Remember the governing, the rule, and the regulation that govern how data is collected, processed, and transferred is data sovereignty. So some of the challenges: cloud storage and compliance issue. Cloud storage and compliance issue. We saw that Russia, rather that their data is stored on a local server in their country, right? So many businesses use global cloud providers, whether Google Cloud, AWS, Azure Cloud. Cloud providers store data in multiple regions, raising data sovereignty concerns, right? It raises a concern because there are regulation, there are rules that govern how data is stored, how it is processed. Companies must choose cloud storage location carefully to meet compliance rules, right? So when you are choosing a cloud, whether you are a developer and you're choosing a cloud, you must choose um, the cloud storage location carefully so you are meeting compliance, okay? Cross-border data transfer is another challenge. Companies operating in multiple we have companies that are operating in multiple countries faces restriction and moving data across the border. Again, because um, there are rules that govern whether or not you can transfer data, whether you can. So companies operating in multiple countries will face restriction on data across the border. Requires legal agreements like standard contractual clause or binding corporate rules that one must follow before they can transfer any information. So there are times when there are legal agreement and there are binding corporate rules that people must follow in order for information to transfer, store, and process. So let's look at some best practice, right? Best practice for ensuring compliance with data sovereignty. Data localization strategy, we talked about that not long ago. Store sensitive customer data and financial data within the required country. That's data localization strategy. So if the country said, or the regulation of that state or country say that data must be localized, it means you must store the data within the required country. U.S. region user use region specific data center to comply with local laws. So not US, use region specific data center to comply with local laws. Encrypt data in transit and at rest, prevent unauthorized access by government or cyber criminals, use end-to-end encryption to protect sensitive information. So even when data is localized and all of that, many countries have to protect their information from that it's not accessed by unauthorized access by governments and other cyber criminals, because the thing is everybody wants to know what the classified information is in another country, right? And that's why China, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I don't know how accurate it is, but person always say China trying to hack into America database system, always trying to steal information from America, right? So they have to find ways to protect those information, those data, right? Implement access control and zero trust security. So right now, guess so what we're talking about is best practices in data sovereignty and data collection and data storing. So implement access control and zero trust security, restrict access to sensitive data based on the user role and jurisdiction. These can prevent the misuse and the mishandling of data sovereignty, right? So these are just some of the things that can be implemented to so prevent the misuse and transferring of information outside of the local regulation, right? Use zero trust framework to verify all access requests. You can monitor data transfer and compliance audit. That's a best practice. Monitor the data transfer and compliance audit to make sure that people are not transferring information that should not be transferred out of the company across border. You can implement those measures. Conduct regular security audit to ensure compliance. Companies can do that. Use cloud service with regional compliance certification. So cloud service with regional compliance certification is another means of best practice. Choose cloud providers that offer data sovereignty compliance option that can help to keep you out of problem. We know that AWS and GovCloud and Sovereignty Cloud, all of those probably offer those. Those are examples. They have data sovereignty compliance, right? Option. So if you use one of those options, then you probably won't get in any problem, any fines, or any bans, right? Ensure cloud contracts ensure cloud contracts specify where data is stored and processed. So you want to know that, because if you're going to do any business in another country with their data or start, you gotta know, ensure that the contract state where the data is stored and processed. You have to ensure all of that for your own safety. So let's look at some real world example of data sovereignty in action. Case study: Microsoft versus US government 2018 and Cloud Act impact. The US government demands that Microsoft hand over emails stored on a server in Ireland. Microsoft refused, arguing that the data was under EU jurisdiction. The case led to the U.S. Cloud Act, allowing U.S. law enforcement to access data stored outside the USA under certain conditions. Highlight the complexity of the cross-border data sovereignty law. So you see, there are laws that govern that, and so they breached the law. If you realize it was breached, so again, let's backtrack a little. Data sovereignty, legal compliance, different country have different data protection law, and we see the different laws: California, CCP, GDPR, and EU, right? So we have to make sure that we know the law that govern the data processing, storage, right? And we have data privacy and security ensures sensitive information is not accessed, protection against cross-border transfer. We have all the laws that govern that. Okay, I was at the wrong place. So at all times, you must know that whatever information you're collecting from anyone, that those data are being stored and processed based on regulation, you must follow. Let's look at some multiple choice question on data sovereignty. What is the primary concept of data sovereignty? Is it A, the ability of companies to store data anywhere without restriction? B, the control and regulation of the database and the law of the country where it is stored? C, rules stating that all data must be public, publicly accessible. And D, the process of deleting all personal data after a certain period. And we say data sovereignty is all about the control and regulation of data based on the laws of the country where it is stored. So the control and the regulation of data based on the laws of the country where it is stored. Which of the following is an example of data sovereignty in action? A company freely transferring customer data across international borders. A European company ensuring that its customer data is stored only in UB base server to comply with the GDPR. A cloud service provider deleting all users' data after 1 month. A company storing data without any compliance concern. So which of the following is an example of data sovereignty? And it will be B, European company ensuring data ensuring that its customer data is stored only in the EU based server to comply with their GDPR. Which of the following best describe data localization? The requirement that data must remain stored within a specific country or region, the automatic deletion of data once it is no longer needed, the encryption of data before storing it in another country, the process of backing up data in multiple locations worldwide. Correct. So the correct answer will be the requirement that data must remain stored within specific region or country. And we said that earlier, that data localization state that data must be collected and stored within that particular country, right? So it must store within there. That's what it states. Which law enforces strict data sovereignty requirement within the European Union? Which laws, which law enforce strict data sovereignty requirement within European Union? Is it IPA, GDPR, PC, PCI, DSS, or FISHMA? So it will be the um the GDPR that enforce it. What challenge does data sovereignty pose for companies using cloud service? What are some of the challenges that they will face or it poses? Cloud servers do not allow encrypted storage. Companies must ensure data is stored in a compliance with region while using global cloud providers. Cloud storage is completely unregulated. Data sovereignty only applies to physical server, not cloud storage. And the answer will be B. Companies must ensure data is stored in compliant region while using global cloud provider. Which of the following best describe data localization? I think we did that one already. That's already. What is what is one of the main reasons government enforces data sovereignty law? Why would they enforce data sovereignty law? Is it to prevent companies from collecting any data, to ensure their citizens' data is protected under local regulation, to ensure companies to to encourage companies to store all data on personal devices, to make data freely accessible to the public. And one of the reasons that there are sovereignty, data sovereignty, is to ensure their citizens' data are protected under local regulation. The U.S. Cloud Act allows. The U.S. Cloud Act, the U.S. law enforcement to require access to data stored by U.S. based company, even if stored in foreign region countries. All countries to access any U.S. company's data. Data to be stored only on physical server within the U.S. Companies to delete all customer data upon request. The answer will be U.S. law enforcement to request access to data stored by U.S. based company even if stored in foreign country. Which of the following law requires strict data localization in China? The GDPR, the CCPA, China's cybersecurity law and personalized information protection. And the correct answer will be C. We said that it's the cybersecurity here in China. What security measure can companies take to comply with data sovereignty law when using cloud storage? So, what security measures can companies take to comply with data sovereignty laws when using cloud storage? Encrypt data at rest in transit while selecting region specific data center. Allow all employees to store data on personal cloud accounts. Store data without any backups to avoid compliance issues. Transfer all sensitive data to external hard drives instead of cloud storage. And the answer will be encrypt data at rest in transit while selecting region specific data. This is a bonus question. A multinational company collects customers' data from several countries. What should it do to ensure compliance with data sovereignty law? Store all data in a single country regardless of the regulation. apply universal security policy without considering individual country law, identify and comply with specific data regulation of each country where the data is collected, ignore local laws and focus only on policies. And I'm going to allow you to answer that question. So the next aspect that we're going to look at is securing data. How do we secure our data? Know that you understand their regulation and regulatory bodies and their policies that govern um, data. Now we're going to look at securing data. So data encryption is a means of which we can secure our data. We talked briefly on it in the first part of the class. In the other lesson, data encryption is one way we can secure our data. Transform data into unreadable format and protect it from unauthorized access. So that's what data security does in terms of data encryption. So we can encrypt the data, and we did say that when you encrypt the data, what you're trying to do is to make that data unreadable to anyone that will want to gain access to it. That is exactly what we are saying. And there are multiple methods that we're going to deal with in another class of how do you go about encrypting data. And so securing data, we're going to encrypt it. We're going to make sure that whoever gain access to this data is unable to read it. Then another way to secure data is access controls. And so access controls, what it does, it restrict access to the data based on the user's roles and permission. It ensures that only authorized personnel can view and modify sensitive information. So, like I said earlier, that if there is somebody within the account department, we are going to ensure everybody can log to the system, but not everybody will have the access or the right to certain level of information within the company, because you cannot allow an employee within the account department to have high level access because of the same reason of data loss, data theft, data corruption, and all of that. So we have to make sure that there are access controls that are there, that if you are in certain location or region, there are restriction, right, to where you can access the company's data from without a VPN, right? So those are very important. And then multi-factor authentication is another way of securing your data, of securing data. Add an extra layer of security, and it requires users to prove multiple ways of their identification before granting any form of access. Because you know the thing is, anyone can be anywhere trying to log into a system. So we want to know if it is you. So you usually in multi-factor authentication, you use who you are, what you, where you are, what you have, who you are. Some, yeah, I think those terminology it does use. Okay, so securing the data. So we just look at some of the core data security strategy. We said access control policy, implementing role-based at least and give least privilege access control. Least privilege access control is very good in a company. Encryption, we said, encrypting the data at rest, in transit, and in use to prevent unauthorized access. Secure authentication, endpoint security. So endpoint security is protecting the device access data. The what you're doing, you're protecting the device accessing the data with antivirus software and endpoint detection. And then you have another way to secure data is network security, developing firewalls and intrusion detection and secure communication protocol. And those means what they do, they protect your data, right? Security auditing and monitoring is another way of securing the data. So regular reviewing data access log and performing pen testing. All of this tell you if there is any likelihood of any breach, if there is any weaknesses in the system, and it tries to make sure that if there was anyone trying to log in, trying to take the information, that you know you get them. Okay, so let's look at data loss prevention. So when we talk about data loss prevention, right, is protecting potential data loss scenario and vulnerability, implementing security measure to prevent data loss, right? And that is the protection aspect of it. So we identify potential data loss scenario and vulnerability. So when you're doing data loss prevention, that is the means and the ways and the measurement that you're going to put in place to mitigate any likelihood of any data to be lost or data to be at risk. So one of the means is to identify, first of all, what data do you have that will lost. What are your data? What do you have? What are the vulnerable data, or the sensitive data? So you got to identify the data first. And when you identify the data, then you're going to take a measure to protect the data. So we're going to implement security measures to protect the data, so we don't lose the data, right? So what measures are we going to put in place to protect the data so we don't lose the data? And there are many um, methods and ways that we can do, which we're going to be talking about. And then we're going to have detect. And detect is try to put something in place to monitor any suspicious activity to potential data breach. So we're going to put a detecting system on, intrusion detection, all of those firewall, everything. We're going to put those in place. Then we're going to develop respond. Have a plan in place to respond to data loss incident. What plan? If we lose the data, if there is a breach, what are the plans that we have in place in order to respond to the data? And the recovery, restore the data and system to their original state. So if there is a breach, right, of data, what it is that is you have in place, what are the procedure that the organization must follow to ensure there is no to ensure that everything goes back to its normal runnings, right? So there got to be backups, okay? There got to be a plan that this is the way you're going to handle any breach or data loss inside this organization. So we talk about data prevention. That's what we're basically talking about. It's not anything huge, but it's just method and system that is put in place just in case your data is lost. So, what are some common causes of data loss? What are the causes of data loss? Accidental deletion, human error leading to loss of critical files. Sometimes that happen within an organization. What you will have happen is that sometimes people are accidentally delete the information. That is what we call a human error, right? We have malware and ransomware attack. This is a way you can lose data. Cyber criminal encrypting of are are stealing the data. Um, that's why we always said have a backup. Make sure you back up the system. Make sure that the files are encrypted, because even if they try to get them, they can't do anything with it, and you have them back up somewhere else. So they you can have a data loss through malware and ransomware attack, where the attacker decide to encrypt all your documents and decided until you pay the ransom, then you are going to get back your file. And some of them, even when you pay the ransom, they never give you. So another common cause of data is inside threat, right? Threat. Employees or contractor misusing data. So this is another problem. You have to do behavioral analysis, observation of the employee, put monitoring system in place. So if they're trying to get the information or email it, right? Earlier we talked about the email that we there was a monitoring on the email of those who were transferring data. And so when they try to transfer it, it will alert the custodian, right? And they could report it to the owner of the data. Hardware failures, this happen all the time. Drivers crash, drive crash, system corruption or power surge. All of these are ways which you could lose your data. So again, back up your system, right? Make sure that you give least privilege, access control, unauthorized data transfers. People do that all the time. Sensitive data being shared via unapproved channel for whatever the reasons are that um, employees or people would want to transfer the data, but they do it. So key data loss prevention strategy is endpoint. Monitor data movement on a local device. So another one is, this is very good. So you are at your station, you're working at your computer, but the IT department or the sysadmin or whoever is in charge is ensuring that whatever you're doing at your point on your device and machine, that those are monitored. So monitor data movement on a local device is very important. It ensures really that you're following the policies and the regulation of the company. That if they said don't transfer any data, don't move anything, you don't have the authority to do it, that you are following suit, right? That you're not just doing whatever you feel like. Network data loss prevention. Track data transfer across network connection. So that's another way our strategy that one that the owner of the data or to protect the data can do, right? Monitor you, monitor, track you down to ensure that the data transfer across the network, right? That you are not trying to smuggle out sensitive information. Cloud data loss prevention. Secure data stored and shared in cloud environment. That's a big thing. Companies have to ensure that all data that are stored on the cloud, that they are secure. And we spoke about that earlier, that every data stored on the cloud must be secured. Data at rest, data in use, that all those data are secure. Users activity monitoring is another way that we can prevent data loss. Detecting uh, um, insiders, putting system in place to detect the users' behavior, the insiders, the workers, just to prevent inside threats. Because one thing we know for sure is that insiders have more information than the people on the outside. So we want to make sure that all the information that is on the inside, that we are monitoring the employee, we are monitoring everybody to ensure that they are not just doing what they feel like when they feel like with the information they feel like. So let's look at scenario and data loss prevention. Preventing preventing accidental deletion of illegal documents. A law firm maintain a database of confidential case files. A paralegal accidentally delete an important document while organizing folders. Fortunately, the firm's DLP system include automated backup and version control, allowing it to restore the file immediately. So that's a system that they put in place. It is an backup system. So because they delete the file, they were able to go back and find those files that were deleted. Well, that's a very good practice for the organization. Blocking unauthorized USB data transfer. Sometimes people carry their USB, or malicious individual will carry their USB and they want to transfer information to it. So let's look at this scenario. An employee at a healthcare company tries to copy patient record onto a US drive for personal use. The company's endpoint um, DLP solution detects the attempt and automatically block the transfer, preventing unauthorized data exfiltration. Right? So they put the endpoint data loss prevention solution on their system, and so it detects that somebody was trying to transfer the information and it blocks them. And I think that is very good. Detecting a suspicious email attachment. A financial company employee receive an email with an attachment labeled urgent invoice from an unknown sender. Before the file can be downloaded, the, the, the DLP system flags it as potential malware or phishing attack and quarantines it for security review, because they're probably trying to download a malware to steal companies' information. So remember that in all that you do, the best practice is that to secure against data theft, right? Secure yourself against every form of data theft. And then I will see you in the next class. So just remember that one of the things that you must do is reach out to me if you have any questions. Read over the slides, and you don't have to watch the video all at once. Take your time and go through each concept, and then it's going to make clearer sense to you as you proceed through the course how important it is, and that all that we're trying to do, everything is surrounded around confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. At the at the end of the day, that's what it is all about. So I'll see you in the next class.